Imagine two 18-year-old college freshmen. One knows that someday they're going to inherit a paid-off house and $500,000 from their grandparents. The other knows that they will likely inherit nothing. No property, money, life insurance payment, nothing. Both are intelligent, they really work hard, but are they starting from the same place? I'm Becky. I'm a professor of communication and a farm girl originally from southern Wisconsin. Welcome to my little corner of the internet. Today, I want to spark some conversation about inherited wealth, which is one of the biggest but least discussed factors that shapes people's financial lives. It affects career choices, education, our ability to take risks, and perhaps to some extent, even our motivation. In this video essay, I want to take a look at the nuances of inherited wealth, and I'll briefly start with a snapshot of my own background for a little bit of context. All right, so my parents owned and operated a small dairy farm, and that's where my sisters and I grew up. To say that money was tight would be the understatement of the century, and I knew that whatever I wanted to achieve for myself professionally, I was going to have to finance myself. And it's not that my parents didn't want to help financially, but small-time dairy farming is a bottomless pit into which you are constantly throwing money. So between building maintenance, caring for your animals, keeping your family healthy, paying the utilities and so on, without getting too much into the weeds, it was a challenging life that forced us to become both resourceful and resilient. So with that, let's take a broader look at inherited wealth. Let's start with the built-in financial cushion. All right, so one of the biggest advantages of inherited wealth isn't the money itself, but it's knowing that the money is coming. If you know you'll eventually inherit a house, you will likely never have to worry about saving for a down payment. Or you know that your parents will provide you with that down payment when the time comes. That knowledge changes your financial planning years before you actually receive the inheritance. So instead of aggressively saving for a home, you might invest more, do some traveling, maybe start a business, or just spend more of your income because one of life's biggest expenses has already been taken care of. That financial cushion gives people options that others simply don't have. Inherited wealth can also shape education. So students from wealthier families often have their tuition, housing, books, and living expenses paid for by their parents or grandparents. And that means that they can focus on classes, internships, networking, socializing, extracurricular activities. Compare that to students who are financing college themselves, like I had to. Many work 20 to 30 hours a week while taking full course loads. Some graduate with tens of thousands of dollars in student debt. Exhibit 1A right here, all right? Others have to delay graduation because they have to work or they have to take a few semesters off. Family support can have a big impact on where you go to school or whether you choose to pursue a trade rather than a degree. And I am a big fan of the trades, by the way, and I wish more students would consider them. Socially, the wealthier student may have extra spending money, so they can go to the movies or sporting events or take spring break trips every year to warm destinations. The student without that financial support likely won't be able to do those things, or at least not to anywhere near the same extent. The education may be the same, but the student experience can be very different. Financial security may impact your career choices. So a student who knows they'll eventually inherit significant wealth can often afford to take more risks. They might become an artist or work for a nonprofit. They can take a lower paying job that they find meaningful since their parents might be covering their rent. Someone without that kind of safety net often has to prioritize stable income over something they're really passionate about. Neither decision is wrong, but they're simply responding to very different financial realities. Another big part of the career component here is social network. If you have a parent who works in a specific industry, and for example, let's say law, that parent knows people. They have a list of contacts who will be willing to provide their child with internships or that very important first job. Now, that doesn't mean the young person will be able to keep that job, right? They're going to have to perform once they get in the door. But they'll walk into that job through an open door. The young person who comes from a family without those professional contacts will have to work a lot harder to get in the door. And this can be frustrating and incredibly demoralizing, especially if the young person without the contacts has more grit and raw talent. And I have seen this happen far too many times over my 30-year career. Inherited wealth can also affect things like entrepreneurship. Starting a business is risky, and many new businesses lose money before they become profitable. People with family wealth often have that cushion if things don't work out. If the business fails, they have parents who can pay their bills until they find a new position, or perhaps they can simply go to work for the family business. For someone without those resources, failure could mean debt, severely damaged credit, or maybe even homelessness. And perhaps they delay starting a family or purchasing a home, particularly if their business requires extensive overhead. Now, of course, money doesn't automatically create success. Inherited businesses often struggle after the founder retires or passes away. Many family businesses don't survive into the second or third generation, and those of us of a certain age have likely watched this happen several times. I sure have, right? I definitely have. So why does this happen? One reason is that the founder usually built the business through years of sacrifice, learning, and persistence. The next generation may inherit ownership without having developed the same skills, grit, experience, or desire to run the company. Some simply aren't interested, right? Others have never faced the challenges that shaped the founder. Maybe the founder grew up in poverty and had to work like an absolute savage to get that business off the ground. Or maybe they had a unique skill that made them some kind of a genius in their field. Running a successful business requires leadership, quality decision making, solid customer relationships, and financial discipline. And those qualities can't be inherited. They have to be developed. Another potential downside is motivation. When basic financial security is guaranteed, the urgency to build a life can decrease. Of course, not everyone responds this way. Many children from wealthy families go on to be incredibly successful in their own right. But for some, knowing that a large inheritance is waiting can reduce the pressure to save aggressively, pursue promotions, or take on difficult challenges. The financial cushion that creates opportunity can reduce urgency. So I knew a guy in college, and for the purposes of this story, I'll call him Ryan. So Ryan came from a family of physicians. Both of his parents and his grandfather were all well-known doctors in eastern Minnesota. Ryan was incredibly bright, he was articulate, he was fun to hang out with, he had a great sense of humor. But he had absolutely no drive when it came to any aspect of his life. He lived in a beautifully furnished apartment off campus that his parents paid for, and I, on the other hand, shared a dumpy 2-bedroom apartment with 3 other girls, and we had this secondhand couch that was the center of our living room, and we also had some old lawn chairs and a card table that I got out of my grandma's garage, right? And most of my friends lived much like I did at that point in my life. But if we asked Ryan, do you want to travel? No, I've already been everywhere I want to go with my parents. Well, do you want to buy your own home? No, I'm inheriting a couple of houses and a lake property anyway, so if I want to buy something different, I'm just going to sell one of those. Okay, well, do you have any causes you're passionate about? Not really. Apathy was the name of the game with this guy, and it drove the rest of us crazy. Those of us who had to earn everything the hard way would have given our right arm for 10% of the resources he had coming to him. That was beyond frustrating to watch. And there are so many other points of consideration with this topic, and I'm sure we've all seen examples of the good, the bad, and the ugly. Inherited wealth isn't just about receiving money after someone dies. It's about the advantages that begin years and even decades before that happens. Knowing you have a financial safety net changes how you approach education, careers, investing, entrepreneurship, and just your everyday financial decisions. And at the same time, inherited wealth doesn't guarantee happiness or good decision making. And some people inherit fortunes and lose them in less than a couple of years, and others inherit nothing and build their own resources. And in my case, the grit, tenacity, and common sense I inherited from my parents has proven to be far more valuable than any amount of money I could have possibly inherited. And in the end, inheritance changes your starting position, but it doesn't necessarily determine where you're ultimately going to finish. So what are your thoughts about this topic? Please share your respectful ideas in the comments. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Please like, please subscribe, and I hope to see you again very soon. All right, have a wonderful day.